When I wake up in the morning and I see the bright sunshine, I will lift my hands to heaven and thank you for another day. When I wake up in the morning and I see the bright sunshine, I will lift my hands to heaven and thank you for another day, another day, another day. Eyes to see, ears to hear, legs to walk, and a voice to talk. Another day, another day. Lord, I thank you for another day. And this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad therein. I am grateful to the Lord to be alive and to be virus free. I have made a determination that I'm going to bless the Lord at all times, and his praises shall continually be in my mouth. I solicit your prayers. I am struggling with allergies, as are many of you, but God is great and he is greatly to be praised. I want to call your attention today to the book of beginnings, the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 37. I want to focus our sermonic spotlight on verses 23 and 24. Genesis 37, verses 23 and 24. And I want to read it in your hearing from the Message version of the Bible. It says, when Joseph reached his brothers, they stripped off his fancy coat that he was wearing. They grabbed him. They threw him into a cistern or a pit. The cistern was dry because there was no water in it. I want to tag this text, used for a subject from which to preach. We're going to get through this. We are going to get through this. If I was in the sanctuary, I'd tell you to make it personal and say, I am going to get through this. We're going to get through this. It's not going to be painless and it's not going to be quick, but I need to tell you, we are going to get through this. In the meantime, don't be foolish, but on the other hand, don't despair, because with the Lord's help, we are going to get through this. Despite the pain of the pandemic, I know many of you are looking toward your future with worried and wearied eyes, but God sent me here today to tell you that you are going to get through this. Even if your pain is siphoning off your peace, even if it seems like you are never going to get out of this, you are going to get through. Even if you've been displaced or replaced on your job, I came by to tell you, you are going to get through this. And I hear you saying, preacher, that's mighty audacious of you. How can you make that bold claim that I'm going to get through? How can you definitively declare to me today that in spite of all the stuff that I'm going to get through this? Where do you get the nerve, the gall, the gumption to speak that kind of promise into the midst of this type of pain? Can I tell you where I got it from? I got it from a pit. It was a deep, dark, and dismal pit. A pit that was so steep that the boy who was in it could not even climb out of it. Even if he had been able to climb out of it, his brothers would have pushed him right back in it because they were the ones who had thrown him in the pit in the first place. According to the text, it was an abandoned cistern and abandoned well with jagged rocks and roots that extended from its sides. The 17-year-old boy that lay at the bottom of the pit had skinny arms and scrawny legs. His hands were bound, his knees to his chest. He was trapped in a small place. That he was full of fear. His voice was hoarse from screaming. No Amber Alert had been issued on his behalf. One day, his 10 brothers caught Joseph far from home, 60 miles, in fact, away from his father's protection, and they went ballistic on him. Verse 23 says that they stripped him of his coat, and then they took him and cast him into a pit. Joseph did not see the attack coming. You know, he didn't climb out of bed that morning thinking, I better dress in padded clothes because this is going to be the day that I get thrown and trapped in a hole. No, Joseph did not see the attack coming, and neither did you. You didn't see yours coming as well. Joseph was thrown into a pit. And I need to tell you that none of us makes it out of this life without getting into some pits sometimes. A pit is a place of dying. It's an austere, waterless place. And you know, without me even telling you, that some people never recover from the pits. Yep, because getting in the pit, there are no easy exits getting out of the pit. Even when you get out, you getting out of something is one thing, but then getting that something out of you is another thing altogether. Listen to this. Joseph's story got worse before it got better. I need to pause parenthetically and tell you again that I'm sorry to be the one to have to tell you, but sometimes that's frequently the way life is, that things often get worse before they get better. Don't miss the downward trajectory. Abandonment led to enslavement. Enslavement led to entrapment. Entrapment led to imprisonment. People made promises to him only to disappoint him. They offered him to help him only to take their offers back. Yet Joseph never gave up. Bitterness never staked its claim in his spirit. Anger never metastasized into hatred, and his heart never hardened. His resolve never vanished. He not only survived, but he also thrived. He ascended. And I need to tell somebody that today that you need to not only survive, but you need to thrive as well. You need to train yourself not to give up, but to keep getting up, because down is not your destiny. You need to train yourself to keep on getting up. No answer, but I'm getting up. No help available, but I'm getting up. I don't have what I want, but I'm getting up. No support available, but I'm going to get up. They say I can't, but I'm going to get up. Trouble on every hand, but I'm getting up. Can't get what I need, but I think I'm going to get up anyway. You need to have the audacity to keep on getting up, to keep on hoping and praying, even when there appears to be no sign that what you are hoping and longing and praying for is ever going to come to fruition. Because in your rising, you will discover what it means to trust God, even when you cannot trace God. In your rising, you'll learn what it means to hold on to a promise when a promise is all you have to hold on to. Joseph ascended. Joseph got up. And when he got up, in spite of the bad stuff that had happened to him, nothing could keep him down. And as we follow his story, we see that an Egyptian official promoted him to the chief servant. When he got locked up in jail, the warden placed him over all the other inmates. When he got released, Pharaoh, the most powerful potentate in all the land, tapped him on the shoulder and had him serve as prime minister. And by the end of Joseph's life, Joseph was the second most powerful man in all of his generation. It wouldn't even be hyperbole to say that Joseph saved the entire world from extinction by starvation. Joseph was a graduate with honors from the University of Hard Knocks and Bumps, and he became director of a global plan to save humanity, and he succeeded. And you know how he did that? How did he flourish in the midst of tragedy? We don't have to speculate. We know by reading Joseph's whole story, and that's why you can't ever afford to give up and to die before you're dead. That's why you can't afford to give up, because your story is not over. I know it does not look good right now, but I came by to announce today that your story is not over. After being thrown into a pit, some 20 years later, the roles were reversed, and Joseph was the strong one, and his brothers were the weak ones. They came to him in dread. They feared that he wanted to settle the score and that he was going to do to them what they had done to him. But Joseph did not do that. He would not do that. And in his explanation, we find his inspiration. It's way over in Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20. When Joseph was looking down at his brothers, those who had thrown him into a pit, you know the words. He said, "As for you, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. Don't miss that. If you miss everything else that I'm going to say today, I'm going to give you the whole message in one sentence. In God's hand, intended evil becomes eventual good. This is what I call a healthy theology of hurt. And if you're going to make it through this pandemic that we are presently in, you not only need a theology of health and happiness, but you've also got to have a theology of hurt. You got to understand. And you see, the question is, how are you going to manage your hurt? How are you going to keep your hurt from hurting you? That's where you need real theology. That's where you need to believe like Joseph, that no matter what I'm going through, that God is going to get me out of this. You need to believe like Joseph, that even though I'm in it, I'm coming through it. And when I get on the other side of it, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to be better, and I'm going to be right. I have determined that God is going to use my hurt for holy purposes, that God will use my pain to make me more passionate and purposeful and powerful than I ever have been before. Here it is again. In God's hand, intended evil becomes eventual good. Joseph tied himself to that pillar of promise, and he held on to it for dear life. And just to be clear, nothing in Joseph's story glosses over the presence of pain. No, quite the contrary. There are blood stains and tear stains everywhere throughout Joseph's story. Joseph's heart was rubbed raw against the rocks of disloyalty and misplaced justice. Yet, time and time again, over and over again, God redeemed the pain. God redeemed the pain. His torn robe eventually became a royal robe. The pit was eventually exchanged for the palace. The broken family was mended, and a new one was forged. Don't miss this. The very acts that were intended to destroy God's servant ended up strengthening God's servant. That's a word today, that some of the stuff that was meant to destroy us is really only going to develop it. Joseph said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Joseph used the word here in the Hebrew that translates as weave, or in its Hebrew etymology, it means a plait or to braid. What he literally says was that you wove it for evil, but God rewove it for good. That God is the master weaver, that God wants to rework the weave that life has given you. The enemy meant it to destroy you, but God meant it to develop you. Let the Lord reweave you again. That God stresses the weave of our experience and intertwines it with our destiny. God puts the raggedy with the velvety. He puts the joy with the pain. He puts the sunshine with the rain. God will reweave some stuff. Every ring, every king rather, every president, every preacher, every politician, every person, every pain that you're going through, all of them are still under God's control. Satan weaves, but God reweaves. So, all right, let me try.